best way to describe the 2019 proxy season, at least so far, and we are coming to an end of the main portion of the proxy season, is that it's really been continuation of what we've seen start up in the last couple of years. And by that, I mean really companies, both on the company side and on the shareholder proposals and the investor side. I think both sides really have been stepping up their game here. On the company side, companies have gotten increasingly better at disclosure and presenting their views on some of the ESG issues. I think they've also gotten really good at shareholder engagement. And so really, there's just been an increasing focus on that. And I think it's undeniable that companies have been spending a lot more time on these issues throughout the year. On the shareholder proposal side and on the proponent side, they've also sort of changed their tactics a little bit or improved their tactics a little bit. They've obviously gotten a lot more proficient here. They've also organized better. And so I would say that the 2019 season is most characterized or best characterized on a relative basis, at least by the absence of major surprises or major new themes that really we hadn't seen before. So from that perspective, I guess what I would say is that the E and S piece of this continues in full swing. There has been, yet again, an increase in the number of E and S proposals in the 2019 proxy season. Political spending type proposals, unsurprisingly, are also ticking up, largely because we are approaching another election. The other thing that we've seen, which is consistent with prior years, but it's increasing in numbers, is the number of shareholder proposals that are getting withdrawn. This is really a focus on the companies that are really doing a good job of reaching out to shareholders. I think they've seen the benefit of that and trying to negotiate the withdrawal of the proposals directly with the proponents. And so while there's been an increase in the number of proposals submitted, there's also a corresponding increase in the number of proposals withdrawn. That being said, the proposals that actually do go to a vote have also been increasing in the support that they receive, not across the board, but certainly in certain pockets.
Shareholder activism is not new, but this was new that we saw activism by sitting employees expressing themselves through shareholder proposals. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So there has been an increasing number, obviously, of companies on the West Coast in particular that have gone public over the last several years. And the way things are done on the West Coast is that a lot, if not most, or all employees get equity. And so what that does is it creates a very huge pool of employees who are also shareholders. And what they have essentially awakened themselves to is this idea that as a shareholder of the company, I too have an ability to put forward a shareholder proposal or support a shareholder proposal. And so we've seen an increase in that, particularly among some of the larger tech companies. And really, it's creating a very interesting dynamic, because you may have thought that shareholder proposals are things that are limited to proxy season, and they happen at the annual meeting and then they either pass or they don't, but it's sort of over. This is actually not at all the way it happens when your employees are the shareholder proponents, because essentially the very next day they show up to work and they continue the conversations that have started at the annual meeting.
So now we're up to board refreshment, tenure, and diversity, a huge issue of the last couple of years for investors, and we've broken it out here because it's a particular poignant one. And when you talk to investors, this is top on their list, along with climate change. So let's start with board refreshment.
A lot going on. I think this is a #1 topic in boardrooms these days. People are talking about all sorts of related issues here. There have been a lot of new independent directors that have been added this past year. So you'll see the stat here. It's 428, which is a lot. But what's really interesting is the kinds of directors that are being added. Part of this is being driven a little bit by sort of the refreshment and the skills matrix and people looking at what kinds of directors ought to be added to the boardroom. But part of it also is driven by some of the overboarding considerations that we'll talk about. And so people are reaching out broader into the networks to try to find people to be added to the board. So 33% of the new class of directors were first-time directors, which I think is sort of an interesting trend here. And only 35% of them have C-suite experience, which is also interesting. People, as I said, are just going deeper into networks and focusing on other types of candidates who may not be overboarded. People have been talking about diversity now with an increased fervor for several years, but really gender diversity is sort of serving as a proxy for diversity because that sort of felt easier to grapple with. And so there's been progress on the gender diversity front. You'll see on this slide we say that 45% of Russell 3000 board seats were filled by women. So there's been really a great number of seats that have been filled, but that still means that the number of seats held by women is below 20%. But what's interesting is if you look further down the slide, you'll see that there are a number of companies where women are either 50% of board members or maybe even a little bit more than 50% of board members. So there really has been a great focus here, and there have been a lot more women added to boards in the last several years.